Hello again, hockey fans, and welcome to another player biography. And in this three-part series, we will look at a man who had talent, raw ability, great leadership skills. He's also a pain in the ass, at times very reckless. He's also very highly skilled, and at times just downright dirty. Loved, hated, respected, sometimes outright loathed and despised. But he was a guy you'd want playing for your team. I'm talking about the controversial all-time great defenseman, Chris Pronger. And I personally have a love-hate fandom of this man, so I figured covering his career would be quite interesting. So here we go. Christopher Robert Pronger was born on October 10, 1974 in Dryden, Ontario, a small town in the city of Kenora district. Growing up playing minor hockey in his hometown, he got the eyes of the Stratford Culletons by the time he was 16 years old. And with 15 goals, 37 assists for 52 points in just 48 games, and racking up 132 penalty minutes, he had it all. Toughness, speed, offensive skill, hard hitting, great puck control, starting a rush, effective on the power play, and he could block any given shot. Pronger looked like a star. He also has an older brother, Sean. And in 1991, he was set to join Sean at Bowling Green University of the NCAA, but was actually drafted by the Peterborough Petes of the OHL. Pronger decided to stay in Ontario. And hey, it was a great decision. In 1991-92, he had 62 points in 63 games, and scouts were taking notice of the youngster. But it was the 92-93 season that had all the NHL clubs taking a look at this guy. 15 goals, 62 assists, 77 points, and 108 penalty minutes to go with it. He led the OHL in plus-minus, won the Max Kaminsky Trophy as the OHL's top defenseman, also winning the Jade Robertson Cup as the OHL champions, and they got to play in the Memorial Cup. He was also named the best defenseman in all of Canada, and to top it off, a gold medal from the 1993 World Junior Championships. Indeed, Pronger was among the top 5 prospects in every major publication, media outlet, and even the Central Scouting Bureau. As a matter of fact, he was number 2. The only one ahead of him was a hot prospect from Victoriaville, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, Alexandre Daigle. Well, the Ottawa Senators had the first pick and made it clear Daigle was their guy, needing a star forward to build their team around. Oh, that was a mistake. The second pick initially belonged to the San Jose Sharks, and they too needed a star forward, but Pronger was a defenseman you could build your team around. The complete package. 6'6", nearly 200 pounds. His imposing presence could have an immediate impact for any young team. But as draft day arrived, and indeed Alexandre Daigle was drafted and taken number 1, and would go on to say this: "I'm glad I got drafted first, because no one remembers number 2. F***ing idiot." Just before the Sharks were set to make their pick, however, rumors of a trade had been going around all day. And one was made. They sent their first-round pick to the Whalers in exchange for the Whalers' first-round pick. And Hartford trades Soviet legend Sergei Makarov, who they had only acquired 6 days earlier, as well as a second and third-round pick. The fact is, the Whalers, who had just missed the playoffs for the first time since 1985, desperately needed a star defenseman and a vast improvement on their power play. General manager Brian Burke knew Pronger was his guy, and indeed picked him second overall, and Burke also made it clear he was eager to get him on the ice. Well, Pronger excelled in training camp. Coach Paul Holmgren was very keen on the youngster. The Whalers were not very good, but they had some good players. They were led by gritty little Pat Verbeek, as well as reliable scorers Jeff Sanderson and Andrew Castles. They had all-star veteran Brian Propp, Robert Cron, and Michael Nylander. And role players such as veterans Randy Cunneyworth, Jim Sanlak, and youngster Patrick Poulin. But who is joining Pronger on the blue line? Well, you have perhaps the best defenseman on the team at this point, Zarli Zalapsky. I just love that name. Who is indeed their best, as well as Eric Weinrich, who has proven to be very reliable. But perhaps the biggest gun on their team was veteran Brad McCrimmon, entering his 14th NHL season. Has made a significant contribution to every team he has ever played for. And the men that Pronger will be directly in front of, well, all-star goaltender and Canada national team star Sean Burke, and veteran Frank Pietrangelo. Holmgren had moved to the GM role as well, as Brian Burke had taken another job, and there were some skeptics out there thinking Pronger may not be ready for the pros, and could have spent time playing for Canada's national team, as that was a rumor going around at the time, at the '94 Olympics, like fellow first-round draft pick Paul Correa. Or he could benefit with one more year in junior, but that was not to be. He faces the ultimate test, suiting up for the Hartford Whalers in the 93-94 season. Pronger played his first game on October 6, 1993 on the road against the defending Stanley Cup champion, the Montreal Canadiens. And Pronger did show some force, committing a cross-checking penalty in the third period, but the Whalers, despite putting up a fight, lost 4-3. The team's home opener on October 9th against a young and very promising Philadelphia Flyers team. Just over 1 minute in, Pronger began a rush that led Pat Verbeek to set up Jeff Sanderson for a goal, giving him his first assists, and first NHL point. Also, his grittiness was on display with a slashing penalty. Then, he had the first big game of his career, in a home game against Montreal, as he made his presence felt on the power play. As in the second period, he set up Sanderson to tie the game 1-1, and then on the penalty kill, tied it 2-2. In the third period, Pronger stole the puck, sending Sanderson on goal, who scored. The Whalers score of upset win, 4-3. Chris Pronger had indeed arrived. And in gritty game against the Sabres, their division rivals, where scuffles and scraps were aplenty, Pronger wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty and showed no fear, getting in the face of the likes of Brad May. He was getting the elbows up and getting as many little hooks with the stick as he could. He racked up 8 penalty minutes in a 3-3 tie. He also showed no fear in a scrap with veteran Ron Sutter. Taking on those Sutter brothers is always a risk, but he held his own. And then on November 6, 1993, on a road game against the New York Islanders, Pronger was fed the puck Robert Cron and launched a shot that eluded all-star goaltender Ron Hextall, and he has his first career NHL goal on this day. Pronger's career is off to a fantastic start. Some say his fearlessness and gritty play is like old-time hockey. Others say it's undisciplined and careless. The Whalers, however, were not good. They were 7-15-2 going up against the high-powered yet struggling Detroit Red Wings. And early in the season, they had acquired more players to strengthen their defense, including veteran James Patrick and Brian Marchment, and pulled off a huge 5-3 upset win. And our anti-hero has a goal and an assist. 2 assists against the Islanders. He was a +4 the very next game in a big upset win over the Penguins. His overall presence was starting to take shape. His physical game was also taking shape, as Jody wasn't scared to throw down. A game misconduct against the Bruins caused some headlines after he got into a violent scrap. As the season wore on, the likes of Yzerman, Yager, Bure, Modano, and Sakic all paid a price crossing his path. And talks of him, I guess you could say, being a candidate for the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year were circulating. However, as the season was drawing to a close, it was clear the Whalers were not going to make the playoffs, and Pronger's behaviors actually started to make headlines off the ice. Later in the season, after a game in Buffalo, Pronger and other Whalers players were arrested after a barroom brawl, but released not long after. No word on what exactly Pronger's role was in that fight. But after the season came to a close, a few days later, as a matter of fact, he was on a road trip in Ohio and he was arrested for drunk driving. Pronger was pegged to be an offensive presence as well, but he was about to enter the dreaded dead puck era. That being said, we're still going to go over his offensive stats because it's fun and I enjoy doing so. In his rookie year, he had 5 goals and 25 assists for 30 points in 81 games. He did gel well with the forwards, as Castles and Nylander assisted twice on his 5 goals. His 25 assists, more than a fifth, went to the team's top goal scorer that year, Jeff Sanderson. And he spread the wealth overall to 14 different players, and looked good and gelled well with top forward Pat Verbeek, collaborating on 4 assists. Pronger, oddly enough, did not register a single vote for the Calder Trophy, which was won that year by some guy from New Jersey named Brodeur. Though many rookies performed well that year, and Pronger, however, didn't seem to stand out among them during award season, he was indeed named to the NHL's all-rookie team. Mixed things have been said about his rookie year, but be that as it may, his presence was felt, and he had a ride in the National Hockey League. Many were curious if Pronger would succumb to the sophomore jinx, but we would have to wait and see for a few months due to the NHL lockout. Then the season would not get started until January. Batman. And Pronger was playing with a huge chip on his shoulder. It seemed that the Whalers were as a whole just not gelling as a team. He didn't play badly, and there was just nothing that really stood out about this season. Even though the team had a new general manager in Jim Rutherford, and were actually in the playoff hunt near the end of the season, a shortened 48-game season that is, the Whalers were just wandering aimlessly, and some nights, that'd be Pronger as well. And to boot, Captain Pat Verbeek, who struggled immensely, was traded. Pronger's reputation was not one to mess with. It was growing as he had a fight with Yves Racine of the Montreal Canadiens early in the season. He did have a 2-goal game against the Rangers on March 1st. 4 days later, committed an intent to injure penalty in a game against Boston. He also got into it with Bill Lindsay of the Panthers, and a real dandy with Matthew Barnaby later on. The problem was, while Pronger was indeed picked by the Whalers due to his toughness, he wasn't really channeling it and using it in a very effective or positive way. As a matter of fact, Pronger's on-again, off-again teammate in the early portion of his career, Kelly Chase, had this to say about Pronger's tenure in Hartford. You could see Pronger had talent, but it's a ho-hum thing. He didn't really have any direction. He was under a lot of pressure, just wasn't ready for the responsibility. Of course, that team wasn't exactly overloaded with players who knew how to win. Fair enough. Pronger only had 5 goals and 9 assists for 14 points, but again, Andrew Castles and he clicked quite a bit, including Castles assisting on 2 of his 5 goals. Out of 9 of Pronger's assists, a third of them went to Darren Turcotte, while he collaborated with Jimmy I Don't Want to Be Here Carson for 2 assists. Pronger was a -12, and his toughness, while assertive, seemed misguided more often than not, and the Whalers' future was a bigger question mark than just about anyone in the NHL. Granted, there were many teams that were actually much worse at this time, but at least they knew where they were going and what was ahead of them for the most part. Like the Ottawa Senators, for example. Well, Pronger clearly wasn't going to fit Hartford's plans. That's why a huge trade was made by Rutherford on July 27, 1995, as Pronger was traded to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for superstar top-scoring forward Brendan Shanahan. The Blues wanted to strengthen their defense, and also Shanny, despite how romanticized he is, and this is coming from me, a guy who actually is a fan of his, was a giant headache as well, so it worked out for either side. Second overall, just 2 years in Hartford. Yeah, Rutherford felt Pronger wasn't worth it, and the team did need an effective leader and high-scoring forward, and Shanny was that very person. But Shanny only lasted 1 full season and 2 games into the next season, and I cover that on my 96-97 Red Wings video. Check that out. Some say it was the right move. Others say Pronger wasn't really given the proper chance to grow as a player in Hartford. But he would have drowned there anyway. In 2 years and 124 games, Pronger's offensive numbers were decent. His -15, however, was, well, not. But again, the team as a whole was just going nowhere fast. Pronger's attitude didn't help. He was, however, again named to the All-Rookie team in 1993-94. Well, folks, that does it for the look of our beginning, almost like a prologue of Chris Pronger's career, if you will, before it would really take off, as part 2, oh yes, will be a much longer and extensive video looking at his years with the St. Louis Blues. Until then, please hit like on the video, leave a comment below if you would other NHL players you'd love to see us cover, hit subscribe, hit that notifications bell, and until next time, I'll see ya!